bridge, and then we'll have.
Jesus loves their body.
Maybe. There's too much money left on the table. That's what we make when hence your offer. When I get an unsolicited offer, I always go.
Things that make you go. Well, that's it.
Usually arrive right on the.
I still be here. Not here.
Yeah, I can remember back in the day. Who was the city finance coordinator?
Well. Well, that's what we're saying. I don't know.
Like the police department building, yeah. In the business center, yeah. Starting.
Oh my gosh, next month. They have a 30-day review for your resolution.
Ashley says her Zoom is updating.
I call this meeting of the City of Umatilla Budget Committee to order at 6 p.m. April 18th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Counselor Thunderbird. Counselor Duffel.
Here.
Counselor Katie McMillan. Here. Counselor Wheeler. Counselor Dennis McMillan.
Here.
Counselor Tenite.
Here.
Mayor Syke.
Here.
Budget Committee Chair Bruce McLean.
Here.
Richard Cotterill.
Here.
Judy Simmons. Veronica Gutierrez.
There's Ashley right there.
We'll go back to her. Veronica Gutierrez. Leslie Smith. Here. Josie Chavez. Here. Ashley Wheeler.
She's there.
I call this meeting of Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4, approval of agenda. I would accept the motion to approve the agenda for the Budget Committee meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the agenda.
A second, please.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Item number 5, election of chairperson. The floor is now open for nominations for chairperson for the next fiscal year.
I would like to ask if there's anyone that has a burning desire to chair next year's budget committee. And if there's not a person with a burning desire, I would ask our current chair, Bruce McLean, if he would be interested in continuing in this capacity one more round.
I would be happy to continue if nobody's got an interest.
Very well. I would suggest that we retain Bruce McLean as the chair for the budget committee for 23-24. Is it 23-24?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Item 6, public comment.
Nobody's
Have
got any?
anybody wishing to give public comment?
There's no public comment. We'll move on to item 7, consent agenda. Any discussion about consent agenda item 7.1, which is minutes from April 19th, 2022 budget committee meeting?
Yes, the last time that committee met,
Looks like no discussion. I would accept the motion to approve minutes for April 19th, 2022 budget committee meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the April 19, 2022 minutes. 2020.
A second, please.
Oh.
Hearing a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I would ask that 2022 is 2023, isn't it?
no,
No.
from last year.
Oh, from last year, yeah. I'll go sleep.
Item 8, public hearing on state revenue sharing. I need to motion to open. I would accept the motion to open a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to open a public hearing on the state revenue sharing.
Second, please.
I'll second that.
Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the public hearing is now open for the purpose of considering the possible uses of state revenue sharing. The procedure I would like to follow tonight is the following: A, report from staff; B, public testimony; C, committee comments or questions; D, closed hearing. Finance Director Ince, please proceed with your report.
Thank you. So the city received several state revenue sharing distributions based on our certified population that we get from ESU. For the upcoming budget year, our population estimates are at 67 people to a total of 7,587. As part of the annual budget process, we're required to hold this public hearing to give the budget committee and the public the opportunity to discuss the use of those funds. And then we will prepare a resolution to bring to council when we formally approve the budget in June and essentially hold the second required public hearing then. So I will just give a brief overview of those state revenues. So this is very similar to what we discussed at the workshop last month. So the first state revenue sharing dollars are the liquor revenue. Those flow into the general fund. The cities receive 34% of the total liquor revenue collected, which is split two ways. The first one is split on a per capita basis. For next year, that allocation is $19.51 per person, which works out to about $148,000. The second portion of the liquor revenue is 14%, which is calculated on a formula that uses property taxes, population, and income. For next year, the total allocation will be $172,000. And then the third that flows into the general fund is cigarette tax revenue. Those revenues are decreasing. This next year, it'll be 73 cents per person, or approximately $5,460. In comparison to last year, the combined increase to the general fund from those three revenues is approximately $46,400. And then the last type of revenue sharing that we receive flows into the street fund from the highway gas tax. The cities receive approximately 16% of the highway trust fund, and we're going to see a slight increase next year from $575,000 to an estimated apportionment of $603,000. All I have.
Thank you. At this point, persons who wish to testify, please identify yourself, give your name and address for the record. Seeing none, are there any committee comments or questions? Wow. Just must do a dynamite job.
Things rolling.
If there is no further testimony, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing on state revenue sharing.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to close the Public hearing on the state revenue sharing, excuse me.
Second, please.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the public hearing is now closed. Moving on to number 9, new business, presentation of fiscal year 2023-24 budget message.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not gonna read through all 10 pages of that memo. There's a lot there, but I do want to make a few highlights that are there. One is just the really astronomical growth of continued growth of the city. And this budget is quite ambitious to welcome that growth, or I guess try to meet the demand of that growth. One of the ways in which we're doing that is a historically the largest capital outlay budget the city's ever had, and I don't think this will be beaten anytime soon. We have $72 million in our capital projects and capital outlay budget this year, and then a 12% increase in FTE across all funds. Part of the excuse me, the FTE increase is also quite interesting when you consider just the amount of work that's being done by the staff that's here now, and the need to at least this proposed budget to increase that in order to continue to meet the existing demand that's in front of us. Staff continues to work very hard through this process. This budget proposal is based upon direction from the budget committee, from the council's adopted goals, from direction from myself, and from those additional incorporated requests from department directors, residents, and so on and throughout the year. Some of the big items that are in this budget have to do, we talk about capital improvement. One of the biggest ones here is to go particularly after housing. We have a lot of the market in general is meeting kind of that middle level demand for housing. But we're not seeing a lot of development on the other end. The community needs housing at all economic levels. So we need both low income housing, medium, and then high income housing as well. And so what this does is let the market do what it's doing quite well at that middle level, and then this is to go after opportunities to create low income housing and to create the higher income housing developments as well. That meets a lot of your council goal, your goal 1.13, and then its corresponding objectives. One of the things also in here, it continues to grow upon or build upon our partnership with our neighboring communities, particularly the county, Hermiston, Echo, and Stanfield, with our Project PATH, which is a practical assistance through transitional housing program. This next year, you'll see that facility be constructed and built, and we'll start having our residents in there. And soon, council meetings will have an update with our partner Stepping Stones Alliance as well. In the last few months, there's been a lot of volunteer efforts, a lot of construction of that going on. We'll talk about that more as well. But with that as well, one of the things we're trying to balance with adding FTE and meeting some of these capital development goals is to make sure that we keep healthy reserves. So you have an adopted goal of a 20% reserve in your general fund and in some of your other larger funds. We didn't quite get there this year. Your this proposal has your general fund at 18.75%, which is slightly up from the year prior, but it increases reserves by almost $1 million, by $929,000. So it's a significant increase in reserves. Dollar-wise, a very modest increase as far as getting close to that 20%. For reference, the state requires what they call 5% prudent person reserve. So we're still more than 3 times the minimum level that the state requires in the budget. Our other reserves, particularly the water fund and sewer fund, they're also not there at that 20%, but part of that had to do with our ability to take advantage of opportunities that are here now, particularly to leverage the water fund to the extent of $7.1 million in water and sewer grant funds. So to meet some of these other large projects, we were just awarded, we've already been awarded our community development block grant for water and sewer lines, plus we've just been awarded a new other funds as well, which we'll be bringing to council soon, that are another $6 million in grant and loan funds toward the efforts of that project. So a lot of work there. So we had an opportunity to leverage $2.7 million investment to leverage another $7 million. And so rather than let the money just sit in the bank and meet a reserve goal when try to meet some of these other infrastructure and growth goals. And so there was a decision made there. And I hope that is one that the budget committee can support. If not, we can go back and work through that. But that's what we're looking at. That's why those reserves are not quite at that 20%. Other than that, we've been very good and responsible with our debt services. We've continually paid off debt and reduced debt over time or renegotiated those. Those continue to be low. And then you have several other capital improvement projects that are in here. They're one by one. If you had questions about those, we can talk about those. Also, just remind the public and the budget committee that we do have a projects page on our city website where each of these projects are listed and they're getting updated about every 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how often there's something to update. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to highlight or summarize.
Thank you. Excuse me. 9.2, discussion of proposed budget document.
So you all have in your packet the proposed balanced budget. I just sent out an email on the 12th that basically just highlighted any changes that we made since the last time that we met. Primarily the big ticket items, when we highlighted the total project in the budget workshop document, we didn't really talk about timing, and a lot of those projects will span more than a 12-month time period. And so where there's some reduction, it's because we'll be doing design 1 year and finish construction in the next. So that's pretty consistent. Design for the Hash Park Sports Complex will span 2 years. The Nugent Park Boat Ramp and Site Improvement Project, we will do $200,000 towards our match for design, but the rest will happen the following year when construction occurs. We also, in public works, there were a lot of equipment requests this year, and we really focused on the dump truck, the street sweeper, and the jet truck. And so we postponed the transfer for the boom truck for wastewater in order to allow for those other purchases to happen. And that was that Scott's recommendation. And then all of the FTE requests were funded. There was one change since I sent out the email. We are not going to defer the police office admin or dispatch. That will start July 1st. And instead, the additional officer will come on November 1st instead of October 1st. I think I included the FTE counts, and then you had reserve balances as well. So if there's any questions, we'll just open up the floor to the committee for discussion.
So as far as so I asked you to prepare the reserve comparison over time, and I absolutely agree. Over time, so water reserve in particular. I mean, the dollar figure continues to increase, but the percentage of budget continues to slide.
Yeah, when our budget doubles, getting to the percentage is a lot harder.
It agreed. I guess at some point in time, maybe a little bit further explanation of target percentages. I mean, with a larger budget, you know, the number becomes larger, but with more infrastructure, doesn't our exposure for future expenditures just become larger also?
Yes, I think at some point we may want to revisit what our target percentages are, because once we get to a certain point, is that the best use of our funds to have that much tied up? Maybe, maybe not. For the prior 2 years, our water reserves were within $1,000 of each other. They were at $203,000 and $204,000. This year in our water fund, our reserve is $498,000. And so, yes, we're at 9%. It's actually lower. Last year it was 10%, but we went up by $300,000 for reserve. So we were comfortable with that recommendation.
And Bruce, also, if I may, that a lot of the new infrastructure that we're partnering on with our partners will create less of a risk, because we'll have newer equipment, some newer equipment in with some of the older stuff. And so where you're not seeing that all that equipment get replaced because our partners are helping along with some of that,
that I would think that some of our operating costs will go down, so we could help with our balancing of that part of the budget next year. Okay, great news, great story. I mean, we've talked around this enough that it's like, I mean, really in the end, it's like I get terrified of the catastrophic failure that we should have been able to foresee. Absolutely.
Luckily now our rates are sufficient where if we did have a failure and needed to go get some sort of infrastructure financing, we're at a place where we could reasonably take that on without a big burden or a huge rate hike, which was not always the case. So we feel pretty confident, especially now that we've paid off our sewer bond paid off last fall and we're kind of freeing up our debt capacity.
Thank you.
That's a question about some of the bigger jumps. You answered some of them earlier,
Yeah.
but I ran out of time, so sorry. I'm sure they're in the document somewhere, but like there's one that says community support, that's 1.5 million.
Yeah, so those are the two payments that we talked about, the $1 million to the port. And then the 500,000 to the hospital district.
So I have a question about that. I know we talked about the council, the building of a hospital. Has the county signed anything or done anything to back up their half of the bargain? Or are we gonna give our $200,000 and wait for the county to do something with that?
County has not adopted by formal resolution yet on their $500,000. I've spoken with them as recently as 2 weeks ago, a little less than about 12 days ago. They're working towards that. So there was trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. So those funds that they are contributing are coming from enterprise zone dollars that are part of the Wanapa enterprise zone buildings, so the two being built out there. In that agreement, it states, so a little bit of history back before that, the SIP agreement, before that the city negotiated, there was a lot of controversy that happened to that agreement, and we were able to work through that to where the county agreed in the Wanapa agreement that it's in the best interest of everybody to leave as much funds as reasonably possible or as appropriate in the community, which generates the enterprise zone dollars. So it wasn't just for us, Foreman was doing it, or Hermiston had just adopted theirs at that time. And so that was kind of the nature of where negotiations were at that time. And so in that agreement, we split the payments in lieu of taxes in half, but the county amount is actually earmarked, depending on the number of buildings, to come back to the city of Umatilla for any capital project that we've identified in our budget. And so now that we've identified it and put a budget to it, they're obligated to do it. And so this was kind of the first step that they were waiting on. They could have certainly passed something prior to now, but if you adopt the proposed budget tonight, I'll be able to now take that motion and then send that over to the commission and say, this is what you're.
Sorry.
And then just a couple down from that, so administration and miscellaneous category, what would fall in now? That's where there was like $400,000 back in 21-22.
That's what it's 25.
I believe the 21-22 is when we had to temporarily fund our marina cleanup prior to having any insurance proceeds or settlements come in. As far as this year, though,
And I'm piggybacking on Rick's question, or not about this line, but the next line down, is the council really gonna spend $17,000?
if every council member decided that they would like to go to the trainings that we offer and take advantage of the stipend, that is our estimate historically. It hasn't all been taken care of. So the 60,000 for miscellaneous, we have two things there. The first, we have just 25,000 in health care expenses that come up throughout the year. That's pretty consistent with what our normal miscellaneous budget would be. We also do have $35,000 allocated there for, to improve on our Christmas lights and decorations for our city facilities. Last year, we used a rental company to put up the lights around City Hall, and it was like 10,000 just for a one time. It's not more than that. Because I can't really do it. Just to do it one time. So this is to purchase them ourselves so that we're not paying an annual rental fee, and either Public Works or we can, have the printing crew of one of the, to put those up for us.
I'm bumping over to page 3.
Page what, six?
We're increasing the budget to 500,000 for engineering.
Yeah,
Probably in the package.
that's gonna be for the first half, about approximately half of the half part work.
Got it.
Rick, I'm gonna ask you to speak up because we're not pushing you up.
Sorry.
Need a loud chicken text.
Did our dispatch fees go up significantly?
Well, yes, and to be determined, kind of. We received a notification that they are going up. Then we received a notification that said maybe not, we'll get back to you. We have to rerun our calculations, and then we got another email that says, I think we all need to get together, and that hasn't happened yet. So we budgeted for the original increase that they gave us.
Yeah, that's, I'm seeing 171,000.
Yeah, and so that was just based on, it sounds like that's worst case scenario, so that's what we stuck with.
On page 7, contracted services that went up by almost 100,000. What are our contracted services for?
That's gonna be for the marina design primarily. We also have like our campground post, that's the RV part, but the bulk of that is gonna be the match for the OSID grant that we submitted.
And so normally it's around 50 to 80,000 looks like there normally. So outside of that,
Yeah,
so 2024 should go down or 2025.
probably not for another 2 or 3 years as we work through design and construction with the marina. Possibly a little bit longer if we look at the additional phases of campground improvement.
Okay. Thank you.
I would just like to ask, are we gonna go through this page by page, kind of what we did last time with the format, or are we just gonna call out our and what's the best use of our time here?
What we're proposing here is, rather than go through it line by line, people may not have any questions, is if you have questions or concerns or anything you'd like to discuss, we'd like to be sure to answer those questions as best we can.
Okay.
On page 11, operations fees look like they increased, but we didn't actually use all of the 220
So we're not all the way through the fiscal year yet. We do anticipate using.
using a significant amount.
Yeah, because we're just going with the season.
Two.
I have a couple of questions on the first page. On our franchise, I'm sorry, yeah, franchise taxes for water. Are we missing the boat?
So,
That
Yeah,
number
really
seems to be
different.
awfully low to me.
yeah, we agree.
Our franchise, so this $1,500 is a franchise agreement with the city of Hermiston for the regional water system. Delivers water to the PDX 63 campus along Lynn Road. That number seems low. Our franchise agreement gives us the right to audit those records. We haven't done that. We've spoken to them and let them know that that request will be coming this summer.
All we get is a check that closes with the percentage of collections, but
So it's supposed to be 2.5%, 5%,
I think.
5%. So I have to look back. So I think you're right. It's a 5% franchise fee. So in theory, what this is saying, I guess you could do the math.
30,000.
It's about 30,000 years all they're collecting for that water delivery, which seems not accurate
At all.
Yeah.
Good. All right, so
It's absolutely on our radar.
okay.
So for budgeting purposes, because that's what we've received the last 2 fiscal years, thinking that maybe the first fiscal year, maybe there was something, and then for this last fiscal year, it didn't change. So it's not what we expected, and so we're gonna exercise that right.
Yeah,
But yeah, so for budget, we budget in revenue, we budget for the worst case scenario of revenue most of the time, and kind of worst case scenario on expense, so it's low on the revenue, high on the expense, hopefully you have a nice cushion by doing it that way. So we budgeted here what we've historically seen.
all right, and then, can you remind me or tell me what, down toward the bottom of the page, it says, 016175, number of other revenue, 1.7 million, and, what is that? Other revenues?
Multiple things. Hold on. I got this awesome software that lets me itemize. So just shy of 1.6 of that, when we approved the interfund loan from the general fund to the water fund. The way the operating interfund loans work is that they have to be paid back by the following year unless they're renewed. And so what we did through the budget process is we showed payment in full. So the temporary water system that the loan was intended to fund is going to be in operation for 2 years, and we set rates accordingly. So next year, we'll, in theory, pay off the loan and then re-loan the water fund half of the portion. The general fund will be getting half repayment plus interest. And so that's what's just short of 1.6 million. We also just have about 25,000 because miscellaneous items come in through the year, and then 96,000 of that is a reimbursement from our industrial partner on some consulting assistance that we received.
Another question as well. This is on page 18 in the sewer section. Sorry, wastewater. This is more of a question with Scott. I know we talked about needing a water waste stuff over there. Is that something that's on our radar? Because it's not here. Down the road.
Yeah, we're in the middle of completing our wastewater master plan, and that just we just got the final on that, so it's in internal review right now, and then get it back, and then we'll break out, the top 10 things that look like could solve some problem for us, and then we'll just chip them off one by one. Anticipate that's probably the best. Top 1 to 5 someplace.
Okay, thank you.
We actually did put in the, I looked at our draft wastewater plan. And several of the projects that it called out are UV disinfection, headwork screen, and sludge drying. So we did put in design for all.
Yeah, we talked about that. Thank you.
There was a couple of big jumps in engineering and water, that is a project as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same, just as we kind of wrapped up all of those capital plans at the same time, and now we have several priority projects that are starting. Couple of those street ones will be in partnership with ODOT, so we're not sure on timing if we'll get ODOT to commit to having them in the plan. We're hoping, but we're getting the funds this year and Q2.
Page 23, what is GFI?
Yeah, transportation improvement fund. So when the new homes from the building permits are sold, they're paying into transportation improvement fund to help with the street improvement.
Same page, 05-6150 capital donation for 450,000. Can you? tell me what that is?
So similar to what we were talking about with the county's contribution to the hospital district, the county committed to funding $1 million for the business center. But that payment is going to be made over 2 years. Like they've mentioned, it's year in based off of how many buildings are built. And so it'll be 450,000 in the proposed budget, and then the following year we'll get the last 550,000 of it.
One thing I've noticed on page 24, very bottom, building department equipment. Looks like they actually needed a lot more than expected from last year. Is there a reason why there was more, and can we cover that in a different way?
So, we made a strategic decision with the addition of the Parks and Recreation Department. Originally, they were sharing a vehicle with City Hall, and when Parks and Rec located over at the PD. We just simply didn't have enough vehicles, and so the building department actually sold Parks and Recreation their truck, and so we have an unplanned vehicle purchase.
Page 40. 18-6175, other revenue for 27 million. Can you break that down for me?
So those are all going to be private industrial reimbursements towards different projects. We have water right acquisition reimbursement for 3.1 million. And then we have the $23.8 million for reimbursement on the POD and pipeline construction. That project will also be taking out a loan for the difference on that project. And then 150,000, which is their remaining reimbursement for design.
Is there a reason why we don't list those individually instead of have them all?
My accounting software here doesn't have the ability to itemize, but I do what I.
That's
37, 1.6 million. What is that pay for?
So that is the expenses related to landing the floor.
What's the percentages, you know, again, ballpark of like 60, 40, 20?
Between the two different vessels?
Yes.
I have a question. Are you done with that one? Sorry.
It's under 80,000 for landing phase and running break rock.
For this year's or for the future project?
So the festival itself will span 2 years. So each budget cycle, yes, will happen in October. You'll,
2 Octobers.
right, well, so you're gonna have a portion of 2 different years in one budget cycle. But once we're past this first initial year, it should equal one full festival if they keep on a continual year.
So it's about 1.5 million for that one?
446 so far.
So we're actually a little bit higher than that now as well. So we have to, especially since it's the first year of the festival, what we're finding is a lot more of the entertainment and equipment providers are wanting either 100% or at least 50% deposits up front, maybe a little more risky since it's the first year and it'll hold us as we continue on and develop. That's a little higher than we anticipated.
So it's supposed to be 2 weeks, so block the ones.
No, the budget will still be the same, we're just paying.
So, page 41 and 43, 41. 18-70-4-21, PC Brownell Water Project.
Mhm.
And then there's an $8 million number there. And then on page 43, we have PC Brownell improvement for another 11 million. And so I was curious, how those two, I mean, are those completely different projects as far as the water project and the improvements, or are they related? How, I mean, can you?
The 43, the one on page 43 is the wastewater, is the sewer improvement.
Okay,
They're gonna be done at the same time. The sewer line will be underneath the water line,
yeah,
but as far as funds and accounting goes, they're separated into the water and sewer reserves.
okay, so the one's water, one's sewer. Okay.
That's related to what you were talking about, I think the last meeting, Dave, where we've lost horizontal separated, we've got to go vertical.
That's right. We no longer have room in Lynn Road to go horizontal.
So
Vertical.
when you bite off one project, you better be ready to bite off two. If you dig the ditch.
And we did get more favorable funding on the water, but since the sewer has to go under, that's why we're taking out the loan on that one. We were hoping that there would be more forgivable bill money for wastewater. It hasn't come yet, so
No, they don't care about that.
that's the water.
It's the water.
Yeah.
They're about.
Common sense.
I got nothing.
So yeah, the two projects combined are about, just under 20 million.
On page 21. Compensation improvement project, is that the one from Amazon, or is that a separate comp? I don't know if we talked about that previously.
What on what for what? line?
Oh, sorry, 41, when I'm 1874.22. Well, it's the point of diversion. We talked about that one today.
Oh, did you say 4-22?
Yeah,
Oh, I heard the wrong page.
no, sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the new point of diversion in partnership with Confederated Thrive and all that work.
Yep, thank you.
On the transfer doc, the 176,000 for the park equipment. What was that for?
So for park equipment, we're purchasing a wide area mower, the deck over equipment trailer, and then a little bit of each department is paying for the saw. The total purchases are 218,000, but we did have almost 43,000 over.
And then what was the 200,000 for the city sponsors going to?
That's going to the landing day, the Delta for landing days.
I know it's something that's constantly get talked about, but $200,000 for the Umatilla Falls. Is that still?
I think we'll just, are we all just setting money aside for that, waiting for it to go down?
So, yeah, right now, in capital reserve, we allocated 2.2 million, and to get there, right now, we have about 1.2 million set aside. We typically will allocate the interest from our capital reserve fund to a capital project, so we did that this year since this is one of the largest ones that had a funding delta. And so that will make up about 225,000. And then with the transfer from capital or from the general fund, in order to get to that 2.2 million, we'll need to either find cost savings or a grant in the amount of 600,000 to fund the project next year. So if we can, if the stars align and we can get everything to line up, then we can do that next year, and then if not, then we'll need to talk about increasing.
Okay, so, it says their city sponsored, festivals, $200,000. That's going from the general fund to the transit room tax. Back on 37, is that included in that total budget number, or is that separate?
So on the falls project, the couple things we're hoping to achieve or at least hoping for is, we think we bid that project at probably the most expensive time to bid project. So we're hoping that if all things were the same and we changed nothing, if we went out to bid today, it would hopefully be around 10% less than it was before. That being said, one of the items that was identified in all of the bids we received that was expensive, which we understand that contractors put profit in sort of just various line items. So even though there was an expensive item, it doesn't mean necessarily save that. But one was demolition of the existing site. Most of those bids were around roughly 300,000 for demo of that. Right, exactly. So, and so we
Get my cat.
yeah. Well, that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna go get our cat, and that'll be something. So we can have that prep, and so we'll remove that from the scope. Now, we won't do any of the work until we've accepted a bid and given the award. Then we can queue up our resources and staff to go do that demo work. But that demo scope of work and that was in the bid, that's coming out because it was just too much. The other was the majority of our utilities that were feeding that were coming from the north side of Highway 730 and coming across. We've asked JUB to take a look at what it would take to come mainly from Lind Road and be on the south side and come across this area without having to come across the highway. We're still waiting to get back up some of that analysis, but the preliminary thought there might be up to $100,000 in savings there. It's probably going to be more conservative than that, but maybe we can get that. So between you know, maybe 200,000 in demo savings and maybe 50,000 in those, there's about $250,000 there in savings and just changing the scope. And then maybe if we rebid, maybe there's maybe another 10% there, and then we can see just how close or far away are we. And Eastern Oregon Visitors Association, EOVA, has tourism dollars specifically earmarked for wayfinding, and which is what this qualifies as. And actually, we'll be coming to council next month with an updated draft of a wayfinding program that we sanctioned. And so, assuming that that gets adopted, and now that we have an adopted wayfinding plan, we can apply for some grant funding. We hope we might be able to find it somewhere between another 100,000 and 200,000 in funding. So that should hopefully make up those differences. But Melissa's point is at this point, it is a partially funded project. Even with the changes, if we don't get any grant funds, it's only going to be about 85% funded. And so we won't be able to move on until we find those additional funds. Or option 2 is to create a new scope for the project, shrink it down. We can do that.
We did shoot fairly high on the wall.
We did.
We did.
So the last time that came in the fall, the idea was see what we can do to keep the same scope and where we can find cost savings. So that's where we're at in that process. If we're not successful in that, then the next option is to maybe look at shrinking the scope a little bit.
We wanted it to be amazing. We still do.
We could use laser lights.
He's got laser lights. I didn't even do that.
Just be quiet over here. Do whatever you guys vote. Whatever you vote on. And I'll move with a smile on my face. That might be cool. I guess I smile on my face and a song in my heart. The song in my heart.
Metallica song, man.
Yeah. Further questions?
With adding maybe this question for Chief, adding the officer in November, is that when training starts, or training starts immediately and then they start working in November?
Should we call it talk timeline?
I mean, So the problem that we're at right now is we don't know what the training schedule looks like for next year for 24. When I just looked at it the other day, there's only one class that has opened now, and it's in
I was thinking with the timing would be nice, like one more officer around Rock the Locks, but you know, like probably not realistic to think that they'd be fully trained, ready to go October 1st.
I've exhausted all my questions.
You caught what I was talking about, done out first.
I know that this is the first year for Rock, so I'm going to talk about this, but I am concerned. You know, I especially, I might be alone in the room to say this, but I am concerned of $1.5 million, you know, being diverted towards one single festival. Especially I get its first year where it's an experiment, we'll see how it goes. I think it's a good idea, I think it's good for our city. But to hear things like that, you know, things for Scott had to prevent things in his budget from happening this year. We have some bigger things coming up around the pipe, and we can, you know, potentially reduce this number for next year.
So to clarify, 1.5 isn't the net for that. And we anticipate 1.4 in revenue.
Okay.
And so we're talking a net of about 100,000, not 1.5, because that's very, very different.
Okay, even then, still, on this document as is now, I am concerned that this money could be put towards something else in the long game. I don't know,
I hear what you're
I'm
saying.
not on board, but I think it's a good event right now, but I think it needs to go.
I'm just wondering down the line, will this flip and we'll start to get more money than we'll put into it?
We've all been to concerts. We've all been to festivals. You start out with a debt. You invite people over, they bring a friend. They pay money to go in. Every person that comes in spends money. That cuts down your debt. That's typical. So you can't go, well, it's gonna cost us 1.5 million. Well, yeah, if we don't have it and you pay everything out, sure, it's gonna be $1.5 million. If you buy a dump truck, it's $80,000. Where's your return? What's your return on investment? Zero. Other than use, right? So with an event, you have to think, it's like me at my restaurant. I buy 40 cases of beer. I don't go, oh crap, I just spent $10,000. No, I go, oh, I have $10,000 worth of product. I'm gonna make $60,000 worth of profit. It's the same thing with an event. I've been to working musicians forever, been to hundreds of events. That's how it starts. Now, if we take a bath and we have, you know, $500,000 loss or whatever, then we retool it and we say, oh crap, well, then we need to reallocate and relook at the system. I mean, then in my mind, that's how I look at it. That's just, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're not biting off $1.5 million. It's not like a budgeted, I'm gonna build a building and there's no return on my investment. There's no return if I buy a dump truck.
We also,
I was gonna, if I can understand, your question was, if we will flip, that's definitely the hope and the intent. And so, going back to sort of my budget 101 at the beginning, we budgeted expenses, what we think are a little bit high, and we budgeted revenue, what we think is a little bit low. And so we have, in that 1.5 million, there's some contingency in there, in case we have some items that are a little higher or what have you. And in the revenue, the 1.4 million accounts for about 4,000 tickets sold. The venue can do much more than that. And so we're hoping that more tickets are sold, which then a lot of our revenue generation on the event actually comes from our concession agreements and parking and other kinds of things like that. That's where you make, obviously make some money in the ticket sales, you make quite a bit, but you make a lot more in those concessions and stuff. So yeah, year one, we're hoping that, that there's that net loss of about 100,000 in this budget. Year two is kind of, we're hoping to be about half that. So somewhere between 50,000 and maybe 100,000 again in year two, just so we'll see what year one gives us. But the goal is that by year three, we're breaking even, and then by year four and so on, we're hopefully hopefully the revenue generating center for us. And to that extent, we're making general ideas and plans with the way that most of the golf course improvements, for example, are going to be funded out there are likely going to come from hopefully revenue surplus that comes from this event. The other kind of part of the coin with that, it was for, you know, what is the council investing in a community that benefits, has other community benefits. And I recognize that there's a lot of potential for negatives, noise, traffic, those kinds of things. And we can talk about those if you want to get in that, but mainly here, so when we talk about particularly recreation, it's normally the rhetoric there is what is our return on investment on certain recreation programs. So like right now we're doing flag football. I know they're not exactly the same, but our ROI on flag football is about 80%. When we do like a Waterpalooza event, our ROI is like 0. It's like less than 10%. Landing days, we get sponsorships. So it's an $80,000 festival. We get maybe 25, 30,000 in sponsorships and other various revenue from beer garden and stuff like that. So in that one, it's a, you know, $50,000 loss. So the difference, so landing days, by the way, is about a $50,000 net loss, $60,000 net loss, and Rock the Locks in year one, about 100,000. Whereas Rock the Locks is a bit different. In this one, there's overnight stays, being a multiple day event, lots of, hopefully the idea that people will frequent businesses. We're partnering with local businesses to provide services out there. We've partnered with local nonprofits that are like the museum, for example. They're going to sell blah, blah, blah for us, and all that's going to go towards that. We're partnering with Shriners. We're partnering with various clubs and organizations and boosters and so on. And so there's this kind of dominoing economic benefit to the community. And so I would almost ask the question a little bit. So for $100,000 net investment, what is the gain for the community? So we're talking about all the economic side. The other thing that we talked about last time with council when it came to the event was, you know, what actually is the public meeting is. We need to do it. We need to define before the event starts, what does success look like? So economic is definitely a silo of success and pretty objectionable one. How much do we spend? How much do we bring in? But there's other areas of success. What are the impacts on the community? So we can talk about businesses, but we can also talk about, was the traffic just so astronomically terrible that we would never do this again? Was there so much property damage or property theft or other trouble things, we would just never do this again? And so we're going to come up with what does that look like and see what that can be. So prior to the event, we'll take that through the Parks and Recreation Committee. We'll start there, and then we'll move that over to the City Council to give their final look at it, and then we'll go to work and trying to see if we can be successful in each of those categories, not just economic impacts.
Yeah.
And then this goes back to page 1. So we talk about the revenues from our blocks. Is that on this page now?
The revenue from our locks is on page 1. It's, in the transient room fund where the expenses on page 36 under event proceeds.
Under event proceeds. Okay, so okay, that makes sense. So is there a contingency plan? So if we do not hit $1.4 million in sales, if we hit 1.1, are we relying on other places on a budget for that deficit to come from elsewhere? Or are we?
Well, since we're funding 2 events, I mean, if we really come up with a shortfall, then after the first event, we can decide what a year 2 looks like there, and we'll know where we're at.
Okay. And so that's our contingency. We won't have events.
So there's that, plus on top of that, we also do budget and operational contingency in those funds. And so the state defines those, they go under, they're categorized as a reserve, but they're operational. So you have your operational contingency and then your unappropriated fund balance. Can't touch your unappropriated funds. That's we're putting that in the bank, not touching it. Operational is we recognize that through the budgeting process, it's our best guess on revenues and expense. And if there's a difference there, if we're short, we can go into our operational contingency and make up that difference. If we're above, you can deposit into that operational. Yeah.
Okay.
They're all really great questions.
So when your timer walks up, did you say that any money like that comes you make out of Rockwell will be used to fix any damages to the golf course? Or is that budgeted in the money for the golf? You didn't really know, I guess, what kind of stuff to be fixed up afterwards.
Right. So Great question. We do have, the funding's in both. We have funding in operational, expenditure for the golf course, and we also have funding in the Rock the Lock event for that. So it's actually kind of in both places. But yeah, your point's spot on is that we just don't know exactly what that impact's going to be to the course yet. So we're making our best guess is what we think. We know, we anticipate that we're going to have at least 2 or 3 areas where vehicles have done enough damage, whether it's a crossing area or something that we're going to have to do, like if a pipe breaks up there where you ribbon it off and keep people off, but you can still play around. We anticipate that there'll be, we're gonna have to buy more grass seed, more fertilizer and those kinds of things, that come with it. So those are incorporated into that budget for, in the materials budget for fertilizer and grass and stuff like that.
Also, in a time of the year when everything's going dormant, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and our, I mean, we'll take mitigation impacts, and the superintendent, I think he, gave good answers on that, but the reality is that we don't know. And so right now we're doing our best budgetary guess to incorporate, or to meet what we anticipate to be some level of damages out there. We think we think this proposed budget is pretty close. We just don't know until we have our first year event.
I'd just like to point out too, sorry, am I interrupting somebody?
No, go ahead.
That, the economic impact to our business community is, has the potential to be, really incredible. And until we get to the other side of this thing, there's just a lot of these questions we just don't have answers to yet. And that, we'll be answering them at that time.
Yeah, and so to just build upon that, so I totally agree. I just want to make sure, not only for this group, but for anybody who listens to this later, that the economic impact is definitely one that we should be looking at, but we're looking at sort of at what cost. So at what cost to the damage of the course or to the neighborhood or to the community as a whole. And so we'll create those, and like I said, we'll start Parks and Rec committee, we'll move on to the city council on what we think that looks like. And we're hoping when we come out of it that year one is going to go off with, we're not going to get 100%. It's just not possible. So I'm trying to manage that expectation that an absolute perfect score in year one isn't possible. But we're hoping that we can get a passing grade and have really good opportunities to say, okay, we found wherever this error was or these mistakes, and we can now appropriate the right resources or efforts to fix that in year 2 moving forward. But to all that extent, and to some of the community members we talked to, I mean, if at what cost, if there's just absolutely, horrendous property damage to the course or terrible crimes or other things like that to the neighborhood, I think that I'm convinced that this council and this group would highly look at that and weigh that appropriately based upon, sure, we pocketed, 6 figures, 7 figures into our pockets or the community pocket. But if the social cost, I guess, is out too big, we'll just have to weigh that, and the community will let you know if it's too big. I promise. Absolutely.
I got 2 calls this week about the golf course, 2 different guys from 2 different forces that played electricity. One was Canyon Lakes, the other one's Horn Rapids. They want to include Big River in their events, traveling. They're good things, and I can tell you the reason that the course looks as good as it does right now is because we spent a lot of money from the Rock the Locks and stuff on it. So we're already seeing some return on that kind of stuff.
Well, and I mean, I play out there quite a bit now, so I want to protect them as well. But when I talk to gunners, like, the grass is very mature. It's not going to create a problem that we think. It's that time of year where it does go dormant. You can do anything to that crap at that point. It's indestructible. So I agree. And I've been to Warped Tour. All these, and that's a complete different demographic. So, and there wasn't like the chaos, you know what I mean? It's just, we don't know until we get there. So it's an older demographic. It's geared towards that, people like my age. I'll be sleeping by 11.
Well, I just wanted to express, I appreciate the dialogue and the questions. They're all valid, 100%. And for the volunteers on the budget committee and the council as well, we continue to host these meetings about Rock the Locks. Every meeting, we picked up new good nuggets of information, things that we can grab, incorporate into our plans, which has been very, very good. You know, you gotta kind of sometimes listen to some people just gotta get it out, and that's totally great. I appreciate those comments too. So it's been good so far, and I think that we're getting really good information that will be able to mitigate a lot of impact.
And don't get me wrong, I completely agree with Kate. In fact, that's a lot of money that we're risking with our city's budget. I get that. But I also see that, you know, we're in a situation right now, that's one of our goals. That's where we want to go. We've talked about this. And we want to do something that's going to showcase our community. We have a great community. It's not just about economically how my business or other businesses is going to impact this, right? Be impacted by this. But it's more about the community. There's gonna be a lot of people here that don't even know who Unadilla is. So that's a good thing. You know, we have a crowd and we've done a lot to promote our city, and this is just one more jewel. You know, because especially like you go to Southern Oregon and some of those festivals that they have down there, you wouldn't know some of those towns. I mean, it's just how it is, but they have great festivals. So maybe that's something that we have. You know? And it's different than Whiskey Fest. It's different than everything else. It's just different. We'll just see.
We will see.
We will see. It's awesome. I'm gonna miss golf for a couple of days.
I know a guy's got a simulator.
I know a guy's got a simulator.
I couldn't say first world problems, Darren.
That's right. Sure.
Appreciate the questions.
So, Councilperson Wheeler, do you happen to have any questions? You've been quiet, and I think we're running close to running out of questions here.
Yeah, I feel like any questions or statements I had, you guys have already stated. So, and any questions I had while I was looking through the agenda this past week, I've already talked with Melissa about.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure you got a shot at it since you're remote.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Just wanted to state that Miss Counselor Funderburk is at training in Kansas, which is why she's not here today, so her absence should be excused.
You did mention that to me last Saturday after the fundraiser. You forgot, and I temporarily forgot.
For the record.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I accept the motion to approve budget for 2023-2024 fiscal year.
Chairman, I would like to motion to approve the proposed budget.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, approval of budget for 2023-24 has passed. So I've got a little bit of a out of sequence thing. I actually have some prepared remarks. Yeah. So once again, staff of the city has done a difficult job putting together a budget document that balances all the competing priorities. Of course, Dave and Melissa need to be pointed out for their hard work and leadership through the budget process. The department heads all need to be complimented on their teamwork and continuing awareness and ability to separate needs from wants. Thank you all. On another note, hearkening to your comments, I too hear that the city is spending a lot of money. Compared to the alternative of a shrinking budget and no discretionary money, I would rather be in this position. We have a unique opportunity to be able to show residents the value of living in a pro-business, growth-minded community. With current economic headwinds, we can show what the city can do when many are struggling to make ends meet, and we all feel the pinch when we visit the grocery store. Maintaining a balance of an affordable, safe community that provides basic services and taking advantage of our economic good fortune to provide opportunities and growth we would otherwise not have is critical to our future. I'm very glad we have a budget and budget process that aligns and links with written city council goals, that and we can use these goals as guides through the budget process. I have, I've done a few of these, but frankly, going back to the things you've said, in particular, this is probably the most difficult budget I've gone through. Just because we are in an amazing place and have opportunities, and opportunities are difficult. I found myself, even over a short weekend, going back to city council goals to reconcile that with, an amazingly ambitious budget, but it all connects. And it's, from a budget committee member position, not a city council member position of the budget committee, it really makes some of these difficult decisions easy when this all fits together. Thank you for the framework. 9.3, affirmation of taxes. I would accept the motion to approve the affirmation of taxes at the rate of $2.9191 per thousand taxable value.
That number's got it correct. It's
That
not
is,
changed.
yes, we have a permanent tax rate. We do not, unless there's some property tax reform, have the ability to change that.
If there's no discussion, I'll make a motion to approve.
A second, please.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none. The approval of the affirmation of taxes. On to item 10, adjourn. I would accept the motion to adjourn this budget committee meeting.
Before we make a motion to adjourn, I would just like to say this is how much I appreciate our chairman and the comments that you just made. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thanks, Bruce.
I agree.
You've done it as many times as we have.
You can train a monkey to read off a script.
It's pretty.
It is pretty.
You know where to withdraw, the little tiny pieces that have to fit in that.
Thank you.
Well done. And with that, I would make a motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
After we get that other documents together, we'll talk about.
Yay,
Hey, Darren.
yes.
No, if it's junk or not, but that came, I'll let you look at it. If you related, let me know and I can look. Council members, if any of you are giving your stipend and I don't already have it behind you, I have them printed out. So you will give you one and you come back to me at your earliest convenience, because I can't give you a stipend until you do. I just need this first page back.
You know, stop. You're not.